In the heart of the Ottoman Empire, where sultans commanded armies and shaped the fate of continents, there existed another world, hidden behind latticed windows and guarded gates. A world whispered about in awe, suspicion, and fascination. This was the harem, the private sanctum of the Ottoman dynasty. Our episode today, part of the History of the Ottoman Empire series, will journey into the chambers few dared to describe openly. The harem is often remembered as a place of silk and shadows, where women lived in seclusion. But behind its walls, lives were not just confined, they were woven into the very fabric of imperial power. It was under the reign of Sultan Murad II in the 15th century that the Ottoman harem began to take shape, yet it would reach its true grandeur under his successors, especially Suleiman the Magnificent. What began as a household institution soon evolved into a vast political arena, where alliances were forged, rivalries brewed, and destinies were sealed. But what was the harem truly? Was it a gilded prison, where women were taken from distant lands to serve the sultan's desires? Or was it a crucible of influence, where mothers and wives steered the empire's course from behind the veil? In this episode, we will unravel these mysteries. We will explore the origins of the Ottoman harem, how it was founded, and the sultans who shaped its traditions. The women within its walls, where they came from, how they were chosen, and the remarkable few who rose to unparalleled influence. The guardians of secrecy, the eunuchs who protected its sanctity. And finally, the peak of the harem's power, when the so-called Sultanate of Women turned this hidden palace into one of the most influential centers in the empire. The story of the Ottoman harem is not merely one of beauty and captivity. It is one of power cloaked in mystery. A world where whispers could topple viziers and affection could shape empires. Let us step beyond the veil and uncover the secret history of the Ottoman harem. To understand the Ottoman harem, we must step back into the early centuries of the empire, when the Ottomans were still rising from a small Anatolian principality into a sprawling power that spanned 3 continents. In the beginning, the harem was not yet the grand palace we imagine today, but a modest institution, an extension of the Sultan's household, deeply rooted in both Islamic tradition and the practices of earlier empires. The word harem comes from the Arabic haram, meaning forbidden or sacred. In its essence, the harem was a place set apart, a space of seclusion where the women of the Sultan's household lived. But unlike the private quarters of European monarchies, the Ottoman harem became something far greater, an institution that blended family life, politics, and empire building into a single hidden world. It is often said that Sultan Murad II, who ruled in the early 15th century, laid the foundations of the Imperial Harem. Before him, Ottoman rulers kept smaller harems, much like other Muslim dynasties of the time. But Murad II's reign marked the beginning of a more organized structure, one where the harem became an official part of the imperial household. His son Mehmed II, the Conqueror, who captured Constantinople in 1453, expanded the practice further, shaping it into a cornerstone of Ottoman court life. The conquest of Constantinople was pivotal not only for the empire's expansion, but also for the harem itself. Within the newly built Topkapi Palace, the harem was given a permanent place, its halls and chambers hidden deep within the palace walls. Here the Sultan's family lived, but so too did hundreds of women, each bound to a destiny shaped by chance, ambition, or the Sultan's favor. But who were these women? Contrary to the myths of endless luxury, the harem was not filled with noble women from Ottoman lands. Instead, many of its inhabitants were slaves, captives from wars, gifted from foreign rulers, or purchased from markets across the empire. They came from the Balkans, the Caucasus, Circassia, Ukraine, and beyond. In a strange twist of fate, women torn from their homelands could rise from obscurity to wield extraordinary influence within the heart of the empire. This practice was tied to a deliberate political strategy. By drawing women from outside the empire's Turkish nobility, the sultans ensured that the mothers of future heirs would not come from powerful local dynasties. Unlike European monarchs, who often married into other noble houses to secure alliances, the Ottomans sought to keep power concentrated within the dynasty itself. As the 16th century chronicler Mustafa Ali observed, the dynasty of Osman is unlike others, for it seeks strength not through marriage ties, but through the loyalty of those it raises from obscurity. Life inside the harem was carefully structured. At its head stood the Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan. She wielded immense authority, overseeing the daily functioning of the harem and serving as a trusted advisor to her son. Beneath her were the concubines, organized in ranks with the highest positions reserved for those who had borne the sultan children. These women were known as Haseki Sultans, and among them one might rise above all others to become the sultan's favored consort. Education was central to the harem's purpose. The women were not only taught skills of refinement, music, poetry, embroidery, but also lessons in palace etiquette and sometimes politics. For the Ottomans, the harem was a training ground, preparing women to serve the dynasty, whether as mothers of princes or as instruments of diplomacy. Yet, the harem was not merely a place of education or seclusion. It was a world of whispers, rivalries, and ambition. Chroniclers and travelers alike left tantalizing glimpses of the intrigue within. Venetian envoys, who often carried rumors back to Europe, described the harem as a place where alliances were forged in secret, where jealousies could lead to downfall, and where the sultan's heart could shift the balance of power in the empire. One such account, from the 16th century Venetian diplomat Domenico Trevisan, remarked that behind those veils lies an empire within an empire, where women without crowns rule over kings. Though colored by European imagination, his words capture a truth. The harem was far more than a private retreat. It was a political theater, hidden behind silk curtains and guarded gates. By the time of Suleiman the Magnificent, the harem had evolved into one of the most important centers of power in the Ottoman world. The arrival of Hürrem Sultan, known in the West as Roxelana, marked a turning point. She was not merely a concubine, she became Suleiman's legal wife, breaking centuries of tradition. Her rise would usher in a new era, later remembered as the Sultanate of Women, when the harem became an active force in shaping imperial policy. Thus, the harem was never a simple tale of captivity or indulgence. From its origins in the 15th century, it was a deliberate creation, an institution designed to secure the dynasty's future while cloaking politics in secrecy. Within its walls, power was hidden, yet ever present. And as the harem grew, so too did its mysteries, setting the stage for one of the most fascinating chapters in Ottoman history. Behind the marble courtyards and gilded doors of Topkapi Palace, the Ottoman harem was both a sanctuary and a crucible. To the outside world, its chambers were inaccessible, sealed off by high walls and guarded corridors. But within, life was a tapestry of strict hierarchy, education, competition and ambition, where a woman's fate could swing between obscurity and unimaginable influence. At its heart stood the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother. She was not merely a matron of the household, but a political powerhouse in her own right. As the woman who gave birth to the ruler of the empire, she enjoyed unmatched prestige. She advised her son, negotiated with viziers, and sometimes acted as a regent in his absence. Chroniclers noted that even the Grand Viziers, the empire's highest-ranking officials, approached the Valide Sultan with the same deference they showed the Sultan himself. Below her, the harem was meticulously organized. The women were divided into ranks: novices, concubines, favorites, and consorts. Each new arrival underwent training, not only in etiquette, poetry, or embroidery, but also in the arts of charm, discretion, and service. A few would rise to prominence by capturing the Sultan's favor. Those who bore sons often secured lifelong status, while those who faded from notice remained in the quiet anonymity of palace life. But this anonymity was deceptive, for the harem was rarely still. It was a place of constant tension. Rivalries festered, jealousy burned, and ambition often pushed women into secret alliances. Tales recorded by European envoys, whether exaggerated or embroidered with imagination, speak of poisonings, whispered plots, and the manipulation of the Sultan through subtle counsel. While many of these accounts were colored by Orientalist fantasies, they hint at a deeper truth. The harem was not a passive world, but a battlefield where politics wore silken veils. One of the most vivid examples of this hidden power came during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent. His beloved consort, Hürrem Sultan, Roxelana, defied tradition by becoming his legal wife, a radical departure from Ottoman custom. She was a woman of extraordinary intelligence and ambition, guiding Suleiman's decisions and shaping imperial policy. It was Hürrem who maneuvered her son, Selim II, into the line of succession, securing her dynasty's future. Venetian diplomats described her as a woman who rules under the shadow of her husband's crown. Hürrem's rise signaled the dawn of the Sultanate of Women, a century-long era when consorts and mothers of sultans became some of the most influential figures in the empire. From Kösem Sultan, who acted as regent for her sons and grandson, to Turhan Sultan, who commanded vast wealth and authority, these women turned the harem into a political command center. The empire in those years was not governed by the sultan alone, it was guided by the voices that whispered behind the palace lattice. But power came with peril. The harem was also a place of merciless competition. Consider the fate of Prince Mustafa, Suleiman's eldest son by another concubine. As Suleiman's reign matured, the rivalry between Mustafa and the children of Hürrem deepened. Fearing plots against her sons, Hürrem and the Grand Vizier Rustem Pasha allegedly swayed Suleiman into believing Mustafa was plotting rebellion. In 1553, Mustafa was executed on Suleiman's orders. The shadow of the harem fell heavily upon this tragedy, and the empire never forgot the role of intrigue within its walls. Yet not every story was steeped in blood. The harem was also a place of refinement and education. Women were trained in poetry, music, calligraphy, and conversation. Many became accomplished patrons of architecture and the arts, commissioning mosques, fountains, and charitable institutions across Istanbul and beyond. Hürrem Sultan herself sponsored the construction of the Haseki Sultan Mosque and numerous charitable foundations, leaving a legacy visible even today. Protecting this hidden world were the Black Eunuchs of the palace. These men, taken from regions of East Africa, were entrusted with guarding the harem's gates. Their chief, the Kizlar Agha, or Chief Black Eunuch, wielded extraordinary power, acting as the bridge between the Sultan's household and the outside world. He managed communications, controlled access, and often served as a political broker in his own right. In many ways, the Kizlar Agha was the unseen gatekeeper of imperial secrets. The scale of the harem grew over time. During the reign of Sultan Murad III in the late 16th century, the harem swelled to its largest size, housing more than 1,000 women. Not all were destined for the Sultan's chambers. Many served in supporting roles or as companions. But the sheer number reflected the harem's transformation into a vast institution, both a home and a fortress of power. And yet, despite its scale and intrigue, the harem remained a paradox. To outsiders it was a place of mystery, fueling endless tales of decadence and indulgence. To the empire it was the heart of dynasty, the womb from which heirs emerged, and the silent engine that shaped Ottoman politics for centuries. The harem then was not just a private retreat, it was an empire within an empire, hidden behind veils, guarded by silence, and ruled by women whose influence extended far beyond their chambers. And as its influence grew, so too did the legends, setting the stage for both admiration and fear, both reverence and scandal. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the harem was no longer just a private household. It had become the most secretive chamber of Ottoman politics. This period, remembered as the Sultanate of Women, witnessed the zenith of the harem's influence, when mothers, wives, and even daughters of sultans shaped the fate of the empire with a whisper, a gesture, or a single decree issued in the sultan's name. It was during this age that the harem's intrigue spilled beyond the palace walls and into the empire's very governance. The line between family and state blurred, and at times it was difficult to say whether the sultan or his mother truly ruled. Perhaps no figure embodies this era more vividly than Kösem Sultan. Brought as a young Greek girl into the harem, she rose to become the favored consort of Ahmed and later the powerful Valide Sultan to his sons and grandson. Kösem wielded authority with unmatched brilliance. When her sons Murad IV and Ibrahim ascended the throne at young ages, it was she who acted as regent, issuing edicts, managing court politics, and even overseeing military campaigns from within the palace. Chroniclers described her as a sovereign in all but name, but power in the harem was always precarious. In a world where rivalries burned silently, one's survival often depended on cunning and foresight. Kösem herself fell victim to these perils. In 1651, she was strangled by the order of Hürrem Sultan, her daughter-in-law and rival for influence over the young Sultan Mehmed IV. The event revealed a brutal truth. The harem was not just a sanctuary of silks and shadows, it was a battleground where even the most powerful women could meet a violent end. While Kösem and Turhan played their deadly chess game, the empire itself reeled from the consequences of harem politics. Viziers were appointed or dismissed at the urging of powerful Valide sultans, imperial strategies were reshaped by their alliances, and vast fortunes flowed at their command. Foreign ambassadors in Istanbul whispered constantly about the mysterious forces at play behind the palace curtains. Some believed that the harem's intrigues destabilized the empire, while others saw in these women a remarkable, if unconventional, form of political leadership. The stories of the harem scandals only added to its mystique. Consider the reign of Sultan Ibrahim Itur, remembered in history with the grim epithet, Ibrahim the Mad. Obsessed with indulgence, he relied heavily on the women of his harem. His infamous extravagance included commissioning furs for his concubines in the heat of summer and filling a pool with perfume for them to bathe in. Rumors circulated that he once ordered his entire harem cast into the Bosporus after a bout of paranoia, though accounts vary. Ibrahim's erratic behavior, combined with the influence of competing factions within the harem, destabilized the empire to the point that he was eventually deposed and executed. Yet, alongside these scandals, the harem also produced legacies of refinement and cultural flourishing. The women of the harem were not only power brokers, they were also patrons of architecture, literature, and philanthropy. Mihrimah Sultan, the daughter of Suleiman the Magnificent and Hürrem Sultan, became a formidable patron in her own right. She commissioned mosques and caravanserai, leaving her mark on the skyline of Istanbul. Through such acts, the harem's influence extended beyond palace walls, shaping the city itself. The harem's peak population came during the reign of Murad III, when over 1,000 women resided within its chambers. These women were not all concubines of the Sultan. Many served in supporting roles, including attendants, teachers, and musicians. Yet the sheer size of the institution reflected its centrality to Ottoman life. The harem was not merely about companionship for the Sultan. It was a self-contained world, a fortress city of women whose lives intertwined with the empire's destiny. Selection for this hidden world followed a strict system. Women were often chosen from among the most beautiful and talented captives, particularly from Circassia, Georgia, and the Balkans. They were brought to Istanbul, converted to Islam, and educated within the palace. For some, this meant a life of anonymity, spent in service and seclusion. For others, it opened the door to unimaginable influence, as the favorites of sultans and the mothers of princes. The guardians of this world, the Black Eunuchs, also reached their zenith of power during this time. The Kizlar Agha, or Chief Black Eunuch, became one of the most influential figures in the empire, often controlling access to the Sultan himself. His position allowed him to act as a mediator between the harem and the outside world, making him a key player in both court politics and imperial administration. European visitors, excluded from the harem's secrets, could only speculate. Their writings, half observation, half fantasy, painted the harem as a place of luxury and corruption. But within the empire, the reality was far more complex. The harem was a political engine, one that blended family, state, and survival into a single intricate system. At its peak, the harem was not simply a palace of women, it was a hidden empire within the empire, where rivalries determined the fate of viziers, where ambition fueled both triumph and tragedy, and where the most private of spaces shaped the most public of histories. And yet, as with all empires, this golden age of influence would not last forever. Every empire has its dawn and its twilight. For the Ottoman Harem, the centuries of dominance and mystery slowly gave way to decline. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the harem no longer carried the same political weight it once held during the Sultanate of Women. Though it remained a symbol of imperial prestige, its influence over the empire's fate began to wane. The decline of the harem was tied closely to the weakening of the Ottoman state itself. As sultans grew less assertive and viziers took greater control of governance, the role of the harem shifted. The women who once shaped the course of imperial politics now found their influence confined largely to cultural and charitable patronage. The Valide Sultan still commanded respect, but her hand no longer weighed as heavily on the scales of statecraft. One reason for this decline lay in the changing structure of the Ottoman court. From the late 17th century onward, the empire faced repeated military defeats and mounting pressures from European powers. Reform became an urgent necessity. Statesmen like Köprülü Mehmed Pasha and his successors consolidated power in the hands of grand viziers, effectively reducing the harem's reach. Where once the whispers of women decided the fate of viziers, now viziers themselves carried the empire on their shoulders. Still, the harem remained a world of ritual, beauty, and tradition. Its population decreased, but its architecture grew more elaborate. In the late 17th century, parts of the harem at Topkapi Palace were expanded and adorned with tiled chambers, ornate fountains, and intricate latticework. For the women inside, daily life continued with education, poetry, music, and ceremony. But the harem was increasingly more about symbolism than power. The 19th century brought seismic change. Under the Tanzimat reforms 1839-1876, the Ottoman Empire sought to modernize its institutions along European lines. The harem, with its traditions of seclusion and hierarchy, stood in sharp contrast to the new ideals of reform and progress. While still maintained, its influence over politics dwindled to almost nothing. Perhaps the most visible sign of this decline was the relocation of the imperial household. In 1856, Sultan Abdülmecid abandoned the centuries-old Topkapi Palace and moved into the newly constructed Dolmabahce Palace, a European-style residence along the Bosporus. The harem followed him there, but its new quarters reflected more of European architecture than Ottoman tradition. With crystal chandeliers, gilded halls, and vast ceremonial staircases, the Dolmabahce harem was a striking departure from the intimate and secretive chambers of Topkapi. The harem was changing, not in purpose, but in spirit. Even as its political role faded, the harem retained a place of fascination in the Western imagination. European travelers barred from entering spun endless tales of decadence and desire. Painters like Jean-Léon Gérôme and writers such as Lady Mary Wortley Montagu popularized romanticized visions of the harem, presenting it as an exotic world of sensuality. Yet, the reality was far more complex. The harem in its final centuries was a conservative institution, bound by ritual and routine rather than indulgence. By the late 19th century, the harem had become a vestige of a fading empire. As Ottoman reformers embraced Western models of education, governance and society, the harem appeared increasingly outdated. The women within it still lived in seclusion, but their lives were no longer central to the empire's survival. The final chapter of the harem's story came with the fall of the Ottoman Empire itself. In 1922, Sultan Mehmed VI was deposed, and the empire gave way to the modern Republic of Turkey under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. With the abolition of the Sultanate and later the Caliphate, the imperial household was dissolved, and with it, the harem ceased to exist. The once mighty institution that had shaped politics, influenced dynasties, and inspired endless legends disappeared almost overnight. The harem was never just a story of captivity, it was a story of power hidden in plain sight. If you found this journey into the hidden world of the Ottoman harem as fascinating as I did, then stay with us, because this is only one chapter in the grand saga of the history of the Ottoman Empire. In our next episodes, we'll continue to uncover the mysteries, triumphs, and tragedies that shaped one of the greatest empires in human history. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next. The past still has many secrets to reveal, and together we'll bring them to light. Until then, thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode.